July 3rd, 1990. The last time anyone saw the Reed family, the sun was still shining. Daniel Reed, 38, had taken time off work to give his family a break from the city heat. His wife, Claire, 35, was excited to unplug for a few days. Their kids, Sarah, 11, and Tommy, 7, were packed into the back seat of a weathered maroon Suburban, arguing over cassette tapes. The plan was simple: a long weekend in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Fresh air, a rented camper, and a patch of forest far from phones, highways, and noise. The kind of trip families dream about. They never came back. When the Reed family failed to return by Monday morning, Daniel's brother, Michael, grew concerned. Claire hadn't checked in with their mother. No one had heard from them since they left the city. By Wednesday, police were notified. By Friday, the search had begun. Park rangers combed the known campgrounds, but nothing matched the Reeds' description. No reservation, no vehicle, no tent. Just silence. Their planned destination was Ravens Hollow, a remote forest basin with limited road access. Known for black bear sightings, steep trails, and spotty reception, it was the kind of place you didn't stumble into. You went there on purpose. The only road leading in wound through a dense canopy of pines and switchbacks. Locals said once you turned off the main route, you were in the wilderness, and the wilderness didn't give things back. In the early days, the theory was simple. Maybe the Reeds had gotten lost. Maybe they'd had car trouble or taken a wrong turn. But as the days turned into weeks, something else began to settle over the case. A quiet dread. It wasn't just the lack of evidence. It was the absence of anything. No trace, no broken branches, no signs of a struggle, just a void where a family used to be. And it wasn't long before people stopped talking about the Reeds as campers. They started whispering about them like ghosts. But there was one clue, one image that would haunt the case for decades. Not the family's last words, not their car, just a gas station security tape, recorded the morning they vanished. It was an old VHS recording, grainy and flickering, captured at the Red Hill Gas and Grocer, about 12 miles from the forest's edge. The timestamp read 7:42 a.m. The footage shows Daniel at pump 3, filling the tank, while Claire stands by the passenger door, sipping coffee. Inside, Sarah's at the snack aisle, holding up a bag of chips, laughing. Tommy darts behind her with a toy dinosaur he must have grabbed near the register. It looks like any family gearing up for a road trip, happy, normal, ordinary. But freeze the footage at the 43-second mark, just before they leave. There, reflected in the glass door as Claire pushes it open, is something strange. A figure, just for a split second. Tall, motionless, wearing something that looks like a hood or a hat. At first, the police chalked it up to a trick of the light. Lens flare, glare from the sun, anything to explain it. But locals who watched the footage said they'd seen someone like that before. In the woods. Always just standing, never moving. A week later, the footage was analyzed frame by frame, enhanced, cropped, zoomed. What stood out wasn't just the shape, it was its placement. The figure is facing the family, not the store, like it was watching, waiting. And yet, when investigators spoke to the gas station clerk on duty that day, he remembered nothing unusual. No extra customers, no cars parked nearby, no one loitering, just a family heading to the mountains. After that, the trail went cold. There were no credit card transactions, no calls, no sightings, just that video, collecting dust in an evidence locker, passed between agencies over the years. Most forgot about it. But some couldn't shake it, especially after what was found 25 years later, not far from where the tape was shot. That image, that shadow, would become more than just a mystery. For the Reed family, it was the last recorded moment before the world swallowed them whole. For investigators, it was the beginning of something they couldn't explain. And for the hunters who made the discovery, it would be the first piece of a puzzle that no one was ready to solve. The voicemail was discovered weeks after the Reeds disappeared, not by investigators, but by Claire's sister, Mary Ann. She had ignored it at first, thought it was a butt dial. Her inbox was already full of condolence messages, news alerts, and old voicemails that hurt too much to hear. But one night, unable to sleep, she listened. The timestamp said 3:17 a.m., July 4th, 1990. More than 18 hours after the family was last seen on gas station surveillance. By then, they should have already been deep into Ravens Hollow. No signal, no service. But somehow, the call got through. It starts with static, then wind. A faint whirring sound, like the car heaters running. Then Claire's voice, hushed and close. "Okay, I'm calling. I don't know if this will go through." Her breathing is quick, uneven, the kind of breath you take when you're hiding from something. "We're off the trail. Daniel said we had to take a different road, but..." Then a sudden knock in the background. Not a bang, a knock, 3 slow taps. Claire gasps, then a whisper. "It's out there again." Silence. The message cuts off. No hang-up, no goodbye, just the mechanical voice of the answering machine. Message saved. July 4th, 3:17 a.m. Investigators would later trace the call. Barely. The tower ping placed it somewhere within a 30-mile radius of the national park's western ridge. But cell tower data in 1990 was primitive at best, and the phone Claire was using wasn't registered. Likely a prepaid model from a roadside stand, purchased in cash, meaning the call wasn't supposed to happen, meaning someone, or something, wanted it to be heard. Law enforcement tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was mistaken. Maybe they'd gotten lost, found a pocket of signal. But others weren't so sure. The knocking sound, the urgency in Claire's voice, the way she said, "again." This wasn't the first time she'd heard it. The voicemail became a touchstone for the family, proof that Claire hadn't just vanished, she'd known, that something was wrong, something was near. And for those already spiraling into theories about cults, strange disappearances, and backwoods folklore, it wasn't just a voicemail, it was a warning, a breadcrumb left by a mother trying to send a message, one that no one understood. Not yet. July 7th, 1990, 4 days since the voicemail. Rangers launched the first coordinated ground search across Ravens Hollow. By then, the story had made the local news. A missing family, a chilling call, and a patch of wilderness known for things people didn't like to talk about. The operation started simple: search grids, park maps, volunteer teams. But what they found wasn't what anyone expected. There was a clearing about 7 miles from the forest edge, small, half-eaten by vines. It wasn't on any of the tourist trail maps. No one had camped there in years. But in the center of it sat a scorched fire ring, a child's sock, and 3 deep gouges in the earth, parallel, like something had been dragged. Not claw marks, not tire tracks, something in between. There were no signs of a vehicle ever making it that far. No broken branches, no flattened grass, no oil stains. And yet, at the far end of the clearing, a ring of stones had been arranged in a spiral. Not wide, just big enough to stand in. In the center, a melted flashlight, still warm. Canines were brought in, bloodhounds, shepherds. None could hold a scent for more than 30 feet before circling back and whining. One sat down and refused to move, staring into the trees like something was waiting there, watching. Helicopters flew overhead, scanning the ridge lines. They found nothing. Thermal scans returned cold. The only heat signature was the search team itself. But one ranger, a veteran tracker named Bill Rayner, noticed something just off trail, a single handprint in the dirt, small, a child's. Pressed down hard like whoever made it had fallen. There was no second print, no footprints, no stride, just the hand, pointing toward the tree line. The next day the campsite was cordoned off. Not for safety, but because something didn't feel right. Radios cut out in a 10-foot radius. Compass needles jittered. A park volunteer said he heard laughter in the trees that night, but no one else was around. Officials labeled it a failed search. The media moved on, but those who were there still talk about it. not because they found something, but because they were sure they were being watched the entire time, and whatever was watching never blinked. By late July 1990, with no new evidence and no bodies recovered, the story started to shift. Search teams packed up, media vans rolled out. The official narrative went quiet. And in that silence, the rumors began. The first came from a hardware store clerk in Asheville. He claimed Daniel Reed had come in 2 weeks before the trip asking about long-range radios and bear-proof containers. Paid cash. Said he was prepping for the hills. Another came from a neighbor who said Daniel had installed a water purification system in the basement 2 months prior, even though they lived in a city apartment with filtered plumbing. And then there was the man at the flea market. He swore Daniel bought topographical maps of Virginia and Tennessee, the kind used by long-haul hikers, not tourists. Pieced together, it painted a new picture, one that investigators hadn't considered. Maybe Daniel hadn't vanished, maybe he had left, on purpose. People said he was smart, ex-military, obsessed with the idea of societal collapse. Friends remembered him bringing up Waco, even before it happened. Said things like, "One day this whole thing will go down, and I don't want to be here when it does." At work, he'd started pulling cash from his 401k, liquidating small amounts. Enough not to raise flags, but noticeable to those who watched his desk grow emptier. The off-the-grid theory grew legs quickly. Some believed Daniel had orchestrated the entire thing, pulled his family into the woods to start a new life, or worse, to escape one. But there were problems. Claire's family said she never would have agreed. Sarah had summer camp scheduled the following week. Tommy was due for a dental appointment. They hadn't packed nearly enough supplies for long-term wilderness survival. No bulk food, no ammunition, no tools beyond the usual gear, and why leave the voicemail? Why let Claire call at all? If Daniel had planned this as a clean break, why leave evidence, and why disappear so violently? The investigators didn't have answers, so instead they did what people do when facts don't fit. They leaned into the most convenient story. Daniel became the suspect, the quiet one, the husband with a plan, and no one asked what he might have been running from, only what he was running to. It was easier that way. Until Claire's diary turned up. It was found inside a hollowed-out Bible, tucked in the false bottom of an old moving box marked winter coats. Claire's sister Marianne had taken the box from the Reed apartment shortly after the investigation stalled, unable to part with what little was left behind. She only opened it 5 years later while packing for a move. The Bible felt too light, the paper inside too stiff. Hidden within its pages was a 40-page diary, the last Claire would ever write. The early entries are normal: lists, lunches, notes to self. Pick up allergy meds for Sarah. Tommy lost another tooth. But around mid-June, something changes. She starts referring to Daniel as D instead of by name. Her tone shifts from loving to careful. D said we need to get away this summer. Says it's time. Says the kids need to see the world before it ends. Another entry. He's mapping again. The kitchen table's covered in papers. I asked if this was about money. He said no. He said it's about being ready. The entries grow more frantic as July approaches. He says the power grid is vulnerable, that the banks are tracking purchases. He shut off the internet and says I should stop calling my mom. He says they're listening. But the final page is the one that broke the case open again. Dated July 2nd, the night before the trip. The handwriting is erratic, uneven. He's packed everything, woke the kids early, says we're leaving at first light. I asked why we can't wait till the weekend. He didn't answer, just stared at the window for a long time, then said, "They're getting closer." A single line is written beneath it, scrawled in a heavier hand, as if she pressed harder or was shaking. He says they're watching. That was the last entry. No follow-up, no goodbye, just that. Investigators were split. Some saw it as a sign Claire was scared, that Daniel had gone too deep into paranoia and pulled his family into a delusion. Others saw something else. A woman writing under pressure, writing carefully, maybe for someone else to find, maybe hoping someone would. The diary was authenticated, the ink matched, the paper was hers. But what no one could explain was the fact that the final page had traces of pine dust, fresh, as if it hadn't been sealed away for 25 years, but touched recently. October 1993, 3 years since the Reeds vanished. The case was cold, not closed, just quietly fading. Then a hunter named Jeff Latham spotted something in the distance while tracking elk through a rarely used game trail just east of Cranberry Ridge. Wedged between two trees, covered in moss and nearly split in half from years of exposure, was a sun-faded, late 80s Ford pickup, burgundy. The same make and model Daniel Reed had driven in college. The truck had no plates. The VIN had been partially filed down. But the tires matched a unique off-road pattern Daniel had installed months before the trip. Custom, high-traction, military grade. What's more, the back seat had 2 melted action figures in the cup holder. One was a Ninja, the other a broken G.I. Joe. Marianne confirmed they were Tommies. Rangers were called in. The truck was towed out by flatbed. When they ran the registration through a historical DMV lookup, something unexpected came back. The vehicle was last registered in 1988 under a man named Louis Brandt, a Vietnam vet, died in '89. No known connection to the Reeds, no family nearby. The title had never transferred, meaning someone had falsified the paperwork. The truck had sat there untouched for what looked like years. There were signs someone had tried to light it on fire, burn marks on the passenger side door, a half-charred notebook in the glove compartment, too damaged to recover. And there was one other detail that no one could explain. The rearview mirror had a small child's bracelet hanging from it, braided, blue and white thread. Sarah had been wearing the same one in the gas station footage. The scene was eerie, intentional, as if someone had left it to be found. But not yet. Forensics couldn't pull any prints. Rain had wiped everything clean long ago. The lead was undeniable, and still, it went nowhere. The truck was impounded. The forest was searched again, briefly. But there were no tracks, no bones, no answers, just a dead man's truck, a boy's toy, and a bracelet that shouldn't have been there. For a brief moment, there was hope. But then the file went quiet again, like the woods had swallowed it whole. January 1994. Nearly 4 years after the Reed family disappeared, the case was officially closed. The report didn't use the word solved. It used the word concluded, a quiet bureaucratic burial. The folder was marked inactive, not due to resolution, but because, as one detective put it, there's nothing left to chase. The statement was simple. No evidence of foul play, no indication of homicide. Most likely scenario, the family became disoriented and perished in the wilderness. It didn't matter that no remains were found, or that the campsite had been described as disturbed by more than one ranger, or that a pickup matching Daniel's turned up 3 years later, burned, with his child's belongings still inside. There was no proof, no bodies, no confession, just a growing silence that became easier to accept than the weight of more questions. The family protested. Claire's sister launched petitions, filed complaints, even threatened legal action. But it didn't change anything. The files were boxed, moved to archives. The voicemail? Labeled irrelevant. The diary? Emotional artifact. The bracelet? Misplaced. A park spokesman issued a single statement. We extend our sympathy to the families involved. Unfortunately, sometimes nature doesn't give up its secrets. And with that, the world moved on, sort of. Over time, the Reeds became local legend. Their names passed around campfires and old diner booths. Truckers said they saw a woman matching Claire's description walking the shoulder of Route 39 late one foggy night. Hikers claimed to hear children crying deep in Ravens Hollow. even though no kids had ever lived nearby. One hunter swore he saw a man standing perfectly still in the tree line, just watching, but when he turned his light on, there was no one there, just drag marks in the moss. Urban myth. That's what the papers called it. Another Appalachian ghost story, one you tell when the forest goes too quiet, one you don't expect to end. But 21 years later, it did. Not in a way anyone expected, not with a phone call or a letter, but with a group of hunters, 2 miles off trail, stumbling onto something buried beneath the roots of a storm-toppled tree. Something that would force the files open again, something that would make them wonder if the Reeds had ever really left at all. October 14th, 2015. The Appalachian air had just turned crisp, the leaves golden and brittle beneath boot soles. 2 deer hunters, Jim Delaney and Travis Hooper, had spent most of the morning off-trail, tracking a wounded buck deeper into the woods than usual. Both were experienced, locals, lifelong hunters, but even they admitted they had never ventured this far into Pine Hollow Ravine. There were no marked trails, no logging routes, just sloping underbrush and deadfall. That's when they saw it. Half buried behind a thicket of scrub pine, its roof collapsed under decades of snowmelt, was what looked like a camper trailer. The kind sold in the 80s, small, towable. Beige paint flaked off in long, rusted strips. A single broken window gaped like a dead eye. From a distance it looked like a discarded hunting blind or maybe an abandoned meth lab. Not uncommon in these parts. But the closer they got, the stranger it felt. There were no beer cans, no butane tanks, no signs of squatters, just silence, and a smell, not of death, but old fabric, mildew, and time. The door had no handle. Travis used a crowbar to wedge it open. What came next would unearth a ghost story, long thought dead. Inside it was like walking into a tomb. The air was dense, still, a mess of collapsed plywood, matted insulation, and soggy belongings frozen in decay. Jim shined his flashlight along the far wall and paused. "You're going to want to see this," he said. The wall, beneath years of grime and rot, had words carved into it, dozens, maybe hundreds. Names, symbols. Some were scratched in shallow lines, others dug in violently, like someone had kept returning to the same spot over and over. And in the very center of the wall, one message stood out, deeper, rougher, barely legible. Just 4 words. "They found us here." Jim backed out of the trailer, called it in, didn't even stay to grab their packs. Something about the air in that trailer didn't feel right. It wasn't just that it had been hidden. It was that it had been hidden well, tucked in a ravine with no visible access, no tracks, no path, like the forest had grown up around it, not to bury it, but to protect it, or maybe to hide what was inside. Investigators arrived the next morning. A crime scene team, 2 local deputies, and 1 federal agent who wouldn't give his name. By then word had already spread. The trailer had no license plate, no registration number, no serial tag. A burn mark ran along one wall, suggesting a fire had started but never caught. The roof had caved in partially, letting decades of rain, leaves, and soil collapse into the center. But the interior was remarkably preserved. Moldy, yes. Collapsed, yes. But undisturbed. The back corner held 2 sleeping bags, one adult-sized, one child-sized, both rotting but still zipped. Near them sat a pile of books, swollen with water damage, one of which had a child's name faintly scribbled inside, Sarah R. Along the narrow shelf above the kitchenette, a line of Polaroids had been tacked with rusted pins. The film was faded, the color warped to sepia, but some were still visible. A young girl smiling into the sun, a boy holding a tin can like a trophy, a woman seated on a folding chair, reading. None looked frightened, none looked like they were hiding. But each photo had a number etched into its corner, not printed but hand-carved. 34, 35, 36. One was missing entirely. Just an empty space and a bent pin where it used to hang. On the floor beneath it, a single Polaroid, face down, water warped. When they flipped it, it showed the same girl again, this time not smiling. Blurry, caught in motion, mid-turn. Behind her, something tall and dark, half visible in the woods. Analysts would later try to enhance the image, but the results were inconclusive. The wall carvings were photographed in full, dozens of names, most of which matched no known record. Symbols resembling compass roses, spirals, and crude animal shapes, or something meant to look like animals. One deputy found what looked like a journal tucked into a vent under the floor. It had been eaten through by mold, but a few pages were legible. One entry stood out, dated June 1993. "We can't go back. They've circled the ridge. Tommy's fever won't break. Claire says we should try to signal, but I don't think she understands. They're already listening." The handwriting matched Daniel Reed's. For the first time in 25 years, there was no doubt. The Reeds had made it to the forest, and something, or someone, had followed them there. It took 4 weeks for the forensic results to come back. The bones recovered from the trailer, partial skeletons, fragmented, sun-bleached in places, brittle in others, had been found beneath what was once the campers' bench seating, now a collapsed, moss-draped mound of mildew and wood rot. Dental records were inconclusive, the remains were too degraded, but DNA did what the paperwork couldn't. It matched. Daniel Reed, Claire Reed, confirmed. 25 years after they vanished, the mystery of their fate had begun to crack, just not in the way anyone had expected. Only 2 sets of remains, 2 adults, no trace of Sarah, no trace of Tommy. That detail, the absence, hit harder than the confirmation. Investigators had assumed, quietly and off record, that this would be a full recovery, a family found together, a tragedy with a closed loop. Instead, it opened new doors. And behind them, more questions. The bones showed no clear cause of death, no trauma, no blunt force, no bullet fragments, no knife marks. Just weathered time, decay, and the silent kind of dying. Toxicology was impossible. Nothing soft remained, but one detail stood out. Both sets of remains were positioned intentionally, not buried, not scattered, placed. Curled inward side by side, knees drawn slightly to the chest. A blanket was still partially intact around them, a gesture of comfort, or preservation, or ritual. The pathologist couldn't say when they'd died, only that it wasn't immediately after the family's disappearance. Weeks, maybe months, passed before death, maybe longer. There were other strange details. Under Claire's body, they found the remains of a wool scarf, blue with white fringe, that family members confirmed belonged to Sarah. It was folded, not worn, tucked in a way that suggested it had been left by someone else, perhaps as a goodbye, perhaps as a keepsake. But if Sarah had been there, why hadn't she stayed? Why hadn't she been found with them and Tommy? Not a bone, not a thread, just the bracelet, recovered in the burned-out pickup 2 decades earlier. One investigator, off the record, said what everyone was thinking. Either they were taken or they walked away. Either theory was chilling, because if they had escaped, where had they gone? And if they hadn't, what exactly had taken them? The search intensified. For the first time in over 2 decades, the Reed case wasn't just back, it was active. But this time, they weren't looking for bodies. They were looking for children, or at least what the children might have become. In 2015, Sarah would be 36, Tommy, 32. Old enough to disappear on their own. Old enough to start new lives. But if they were alive, why hadn't they ever surfaced? There were no bank accounts, no driver's licenses, no digital fingerprints, no matches in any missing persons registries under assumed identities. Nothing. As if they had been erased, or raised outside the system. FBI analysts began constructing psychological profiles based on wilderness survival scenarios. Could 2 children, ages 11 and 7, have survived alone in the woods after the death of their parents? The consensus was no, not for long, unless someone had helped them, unless they hadn't been alone. Then came the rumors. A woman came forward claiming to have seen a boy and girl wandering near a ranger outpost in 1992, alone, barefoot, carrying pine branches. Her report was never followed up. In 1995, a camper found a pair of small shoes and a child's drawing tucked into the bark of a hollow tree near Pine Hollow, but no one connected it to the Reed case at the time. The drawing showed two stick figures holding hands. Behind them, something tall, pitch black, with too many arms. Authorities revisited the site but found nothing. No remains, no clothes, just a hollow tree and 30 feet of moss. Claire's journal had said they were being watched. The carvings in the camper suggested fear, not peace. And yet, the Polaroids told a different story, photos of the children smiling, eating, playing, as if for a time they were safe, as if whatever happened hadn't happened yet. The carvings told a story of descent, of someone slowly unraveling. The journal entries echoed that. But the final line on the trailer wall shifted everything. They found us. The question was, who were they? And what did they want with two children in the woods? The case no longer felt like a missing persons investigation. It felt like a containment breach. Something had happened out there, and someone had survived it. They almost missed it. A deputy stepping through the trailer's warped flooring felt a sudden hollow give beneath his boot. Not soft rot, but a pocket. When they pried the plank up, tucked beneath a nest of leaves and rodent-chewed cloth, they found it. A water-damaged spiral notebook, its cover warped and flaking, pages fused at the edges. Someone had tried to preserve it, wrapped it in a layer of waxed canvas, fastened with wire. A label on the front had faded beyond recognition, but the handwriting inside was unmistakable, tight, rigid, controlled. It was Daniel Reed's. The first entry was dated August 14, 1990, over a month after the family was last seen. That meant they'd made it further than anyone thought, survived, at least for a while. The early pages read like a methodical log, inventory, ration tracking, weather notes. Rain again, spirits low, Sarah's cough worsening. Signal flares used, no response. Tommy asked if we can go home, told him soon. It was Daniel as he had once been described, measured, deliberate, practical. But between the lines, the desperation was there. Claire wants to try the Ridge Trail again. I told her no, too exposed, too risky. Something moved near the creek last night. Big, 2 legs. Then, in October, Sarah saw it, said it was watching from the ridge, eyeshine, too high for a deer. The writing grew less precise. The lines began to tilt. Words pressed harder into the paper. As the months passed, Daniel's survival log morphed into something else. Less journal, more warning. They follow the sound, one note read. Never light a fire after dark. There were lists of rules scribbled in shaky ink, some rewritten multiple times. Stay silent. Don't go alone. Don't look in the mirrors after dusk. If it knocks, do not answer. One entry stood out, dated March 1991. Claire said she heard whispering outside the trailer, not English. Later, in June, Tommy sleepwalks now. Sarah says he talks in his sleep, different voice. The last legible entry was dated February 6, 1993. Food's gone. Water from melt is tasting wrong. We'll try the ridge again. If we don't come back, burn the trailer. But the trailer hadn't burned, and Daniel's body never made it to the ridge. Whatever happened after that last entry, no one wrote it down. They reviewed the journal again and again, hoping for missed clues, coordinates, anything tangible. But what stood out wasn't what was written. It was what changed. The structure, the tone, the fear that slowly bled into every page. The drawings began in the margins. Simple at first, a sketch of a tree line, a sun, a winding creek. But then came others. Figures, always tall, always faceless, looming behind trees. One stood over the trailer, arms outstretched like antennae. Another hovered just outside a drawn circle of stones, the same spiral pattern carved on the trailer wall. And then the words started appearing, them. All was capitalized, always plural. They were closer last night, heard movement behind the north slope, woke to fresh tracks in the snow, barefoot, human-shaped, but longer. In another entry, Claire said she heard 3 knocks just after midnight, like a pattern, like it wanted us to know it was still out there. Daniel began marking the knocks, how often they came, how far apart. Always 3, then silence, then 1. Just 1. At first, they thought he was unraveling, cabin fever, isolation. But then the symbols appeared, glyphs, etched between lines. Some matched the ones carved in the trailer. Some didn't. They looked almost mathematical, like someone was trying to chart behavior. He wrote of lights, not flashlights or flares. Soft blue, low to the ground, floating, silent, move between trees like they're scanning. Investigators cross-referenced the journal with historical search logs. On 2 of the nights Daniel mentioned footsteps circling the trailer, rescue teams had been within 5 miles, but never saw the camper, as if they had been led around it. One note, scribbled hastily and half-torn, simply read, "We are not alone in the hollow." Then there was the most disturbing entry of all, a single line repeated 3 times at the bottom of a page. "They wait until you forget they're real." By the final pages, the handwriting was jagged. Symbols replaced letters. Words broke mid-sentence. And then it stopped. No farewell, no final message, just one last drawing. The trailer, viewed from above, surrounded by black trees, eyes watching from all sides. And above it, in faint pencil, "We should not have come here." The discovery of Daniel's journal reignited more than just the Reed case. It opened floodgates. Investigators began combing through decades of missing persons reports in the surrounding counties, looking for anything, anyone, who might have vanished near Pine Hollow or its adjacent ridgelines. What they found wasn't coincidence. It was a pattern. 8 disappearances, all within a 12-mile radius of the ravine where the trailer had been found. All unsolved. The earliest case dated back to 1987, a solo backpacker named Lee Michaels, 23, last seen hiking toward the southern ridge. Her car was found days later, keys still in the ignition, door ajar, tent still rolled in the trunk. No signs of struggle, no note, no return. In 1989, a father and daughter, Richard and Elena Quinn, went missing during a spring camping trip. The weather had been mild, their fire pit still warm when rangers found it. Their dog was tied to a tree, barking into the woods. The leash had bite marks. The list went on. A pair of amateur rock climbers in 94. A survivalist blogger in 98. A local teenager in 2003. A reclusive artist in 2007. And finally, in 2009, an environmental field researcher named Caleb Wren. His GPS tracker pinged one last time, just 1 mile from where the Reed trailer would eventually be found. 8 lives, 8 vanishings, no bodies, no gear, no signal flares, radio calls, or rescue traces. One FBI agent, off the record, called it a pocket zone, a place where people enter but don't leave. A pattern emerged. All cases had similar traits, remote entry points, no secondary footprints, and in each case, some form of disruption in navigation, compasses that stopped working, GPS coordinates that looped, trails that seemed to shift. Most chilling was a detail from a 1994 Ranger report, filed quietly, buried deep. A field agent claimed to have seen a cabin light from his lookout point, glowing faintly through trees in the same general area. When they reached the spot by foot, there was nothing there, no cabin, no clearing, just forest. For years, these stories had been written off as bad luck or wilderness disorientation. But now, with Daniel's journal and the carvings in the trailer, they weren't anomalies. They were symptoms. And whatever the cause was, it had been there for decades, waiting. They weren't looking for it, not at first. But when an intern at the Regional Forest Service cross-referenced historical satellite imagery from the early 90s to remap the Pine Hollow Basin, he flagged something strange. Aerial scan from October 1992. Grainy, low resolution, but visible just northeast of the ravine. A small rectangular shape, 18 by 20 feet, consistent with a man-made structure. A second cabin, less than 300 yards from where the Reed trailer was found. Modern-day imagery showed nothing, not even disturbed ground, no sign of foundation, no debris field, just densely packed fir and hemlock. Investigators hiked out with the coordinates. No trail led there. They had to cut their way in. At the marked spot they found trees, old growth, thick and healthy. One had a twisted ring of metal embedded deep in the bark, possibly a window latch or shutter hinge, now consumed by time. Another had faint black scorch marks, almost like it had once stood near open flame. LiDAR scans of the area showed anomalies beneath the forest floor, rectilinear patterns inconsistent with natural formations. Soil testing revealed charcoal layering about 4 feet below surface. Someone had burned something big there a long time ago. The working theory: a cabin had existed, hidden, and had been deliberately destroyed. But why? The search team found something else nearby, hidden in a cluster of rocks. A tin lunchbox, rusted shut, filled with personal effects. A broken compass, a cracked watch, a child's drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands, standing beside what looked like a tree made of eyes. Tucked into the lid was a scrap of lined notebook paper, weathered and nearly torn through the center, written in blocky, childish script. "We hid here until they stopped knocking." Below it, a crude map, a trail leading downhill, marked with an X. They followed it the next day. At the end of the trail was a shallow pit, overgrown with moss. Inside, bone fragments, too small to identify on sight, and a plastic bead bracelet, red, yellow, green. Tommy's favorite colors. The cabin was real. Someone had stayed there, and someone had tried very hard to make sure no one ever found it again. They almost missed it. Among the warped stack of Polaroids pulled from the trailer, most faded, some stained beyond recognition, one photo was sealed between the stuck-together pages of an old field manual. It had been preserved by accident, hidden from light, time, and moisture. When the technician gently separated the pages with a warm spatula, it slid out like a secret. The photo showed a clearing, a rough wooden structure behind them, maybe a shack or lean-to. In the foreground, a girl, perhaps 14 or 15, standing slightly off-center, one hand clutching the strap of a weathered backpack. Her face was partially in shadow, her hair darker than in previous photos, longer. But the jawline, the shape of the eyes, it was Sarah Reed, older, alive. The date printed on the bottom edge was July 1994. The photo was examined under enhancement filters. The background revealed more. Another figure, blurred, standing beside her. At first glance, it looked like an adult, tall, thin. But closer inspection showed something off, the limbs too long, the posture unnatural. The face wasn't fully visible, blocked by light flare or overexposure. But what disturbed analysts most wasn't what they saw. It was how Sarah was standing, not in fear, not in distress, just calm, alert, aware of the camera. One forensic psychologist noted her body language. She's not posing. She's watching whoever's taking the picture. The FBI cross-referenced the image with the rest of the Polaroids. This was the only one showing her older than age 11. The only one taken after the family was presumed dead. The only one where she wasn't smiling. And in her hand, faint but visible, she held something small and familiar. A tin lunchbox, scratched and dented, nearly identical to the one found near the cabin site. That image changed the scope of the investigation. If the date was accurate and the environment in the photo matched the terrain, Sarah had survived at least 4 years past the disappearance, possibly longer. The question no longer was, did they escape? It was, who helped them stay hidden? And why was Sarah still alive when her parents weren't? In June 2016, nearly a year after the trailer's discovery, a hiker named Corey Franklin veered off a trail near Devil's Spire, a jagged outcrop northeast of the original search zone. He was chasing a lost drone signal when he stumbled into the mouth of a shallow limestone cave. Inside was the usual scatter of debris, rodent bones, dry leaves, some empty cans likely left by campers years prior. But tucked into a crevice near the back was something that didn't belong. A piece of wood, smoothed on one side, carved on the other, just a simple stick. But etched into its surface, weathered but legible, were three characters. TR 2003. Investigators confirmed it quickly, Tommy Reed's initials. And the date? 2003. Tommy would have been 20. The stick wasn't a tool or part of a structure. It looked ceremonial, like it had been placed. The letters had been carved with a small blade, likely a pocket knife. Beneath the initials was a shallow etching of a spiral, nearly identical to the ones Daniel had drawn in his journal. The cave was searched thoroughly. On the far wall, someone had drawn faint horizontal tally marks, 5 groups of 5, and then a line underneath, 26 total, no explanation. Further in, a shredded piece of blue fabric was found caught on a stone, possibly denim, possibly a sleeve. It was sent to the lab. DNA extraction was inconclusive, too degraded, but soil embedded in the fibers matched the surrounding hollow almost exactly. This wasn't just a cave, it had been a stop, a waypoint, or maybe a shelter. Somewhere Tommy had been, somewhere he had marked. There were no signs of habitation, no bedding, no food waste, just the stick. And a folded, laminated photograph, water-damaged but intact. It was of 2 children, Sarah and Tommy, smiling on a hiking trail, likely taken before they vanished. Someone had gone to the trouble to preserve it, to leave it, like a breadcrumb or a message. One investigator said it best: kids don't carve dates into cave walls unless they're trying to be remembered, or trying to be found. The stick was catalogued as evidence, but it didn't feel like a clue. It felt like a goodbye. The interview was never officially logged. It came from an off-the-record conversation between Agent Rourke and a man named Eldon Pike, 74, a retired trapper who had lived off-grid near Pine Hollow until the mid-2000s. He was a recluse, known to locals for his silence, his skill with animal hides, and his habit of sleeping with a rifle at arm's reach. When asked why he left the hollow after nearly 30 years, his answer was simple: got tired of waking up scared. He didn't need prompting. As soon as the Reeds were mentioned, Eldon leaned back and stared into the tree line behind his porch. "You're talking about the ones from the trailer," he said. "I remember the year, 91st dry summer. Elk were acting strange, wouldn't go near the southern ridge." When asked why, he nodded once. "Heard things out there, chanting." The agent raised an eyebrow. "Like singing?" Eldon shook his head. "Nope, rhythmic, like ceremony. Same patterns, over and over. Never words I recognized. Weren't speaking English, weren't speaking anything I know." He claimed it started just before dusk. Echoes carried low and strange, as if from multiple directions at once. "Not loud," he said. "You wouldn't hear it unless you were listening." One night he followed the sound, rifle in hand, boots silent in the brush. He said it led him toward an old hunting blind he hadn't used in years. The air got cold. The birds stopped. When he got there, he saw figures, 4, maybe 5, tall, standing in a loose circle, robes, dark and hanging. One held something, a lantern or maybe a dim torch. He raised his scope to get a better look, but the moment he adjusted the focus, they all turned. At the same time. "They looked right at me," he said. "But I was too far. I should have been too far. Still, I felt it, like I'd been seen. Like they already knew I was there before I did." He backed out, never used that blind again. 2 weeks later, he packed up and left the ridge permanently. When asked why he never told anyone, Eldon just muttered, "No one wants to believe what the woods really are." He paused, eyes narrowing. "But I'll tell you this, no one disappears out there by accident. Something lets you disappear." The ranger's name was Monica Hale. She worked Ravens Hollow in the early 2000s, a forest patrol officer with 10 years' experience, level-headed, not prone to flights of imagination, but what she described in her statement, reluctantly given years after she left the service, was something that still made her voice falter. She had been called in during a seasonal cleanup mid-autumn. The report was simple. A smoldering fire had been spotted off-trail from a hiking couple's drone footage. Monica hiked in early the next morning, expecting to find trash, maybe a forgotten fire ring. What she found instead was a camp, but not the kind built by families or hikers. It was makeshift, too tidy, too controlled. 3 small tents, tarp walls reinforced with tree limbs, the fire pit still warm, wood half burnt but not fresh. No food waste, no beer cans, nothing out of place. But what disturbed her wasn't the setup. It was what had been left behind. Toys. Dozens of them. Laid out in neat rows on a flattened bed of pine needles. Not scattered, arranged. Dolls with missing eyes. Matchbox cars, caked in ash. A stuffed rabbit that looked recently cleaned. Some toys were handmade, whittled from wood. Others were old, vintage, 1980s, 1970s. And then there were the shoes. 6 pairs, small, child-sized. Boots, sneakers, 1 pair of sandals duct-taped at the toes, none matching. Each placed side by side, heels lined to the edge of a mossy log, as if waiting for their owners to return. Monica called it in, waited for backup, but as the fog rolled in, thick and sudden, her radio went dead. The temperature dropped. Visibility shrank to 10 feet, and then she heard it. Laughter. Faint, high-pitched, echoing. She drew her sidearm, called out. No response. The fog thinned for a moment, just long enough for her to see something standing in the trees. Not a person, not quite. Tall, too tall, narrow, watching. She blinked, and it was gone. When the backup team arrived an hour later, the camp was gone. Completely. No tarps, no toys, no footprints, nothing. Just a burned patch of earth. She filed the report as cleared with no findings. But when she quit the service 3 months later, she told a colleague in private, "I think the toys weren't left behind. I think they were bait." It started with a Freedom of Information request, a routine form submitted by an investigative podcaster covering the Reed disappearance for an episode series. Just paperwork. But when the response came back, it sparked new questions, more disturbing than the answers anyone had expected. The FBI had already opened a case file on the Reeds in August 1991, 1 month after the family vanished, but not at the request of local authorities, not even in coordination with the Park Service. The document's header, Reed Daniel Subject Classification, Anomalous Activity. Every page after that was a black sea of ink. Names, dates, entire paragraphs, all redacted. The few visible lines only raised more questions. Unconfirmed reports of non-civilian activity in proximity to last known location. Surveillance discontinued after joint advisory from redacted and redacted. High probability of exposure event. Recommend containment protocol 2B. What kind of exposure? What was protocol 2B? Attached was a heavily censored memo from an internal division labeled Bureau Technical Services, Phenomena Monitoring. A division that, on public record, didn't exist. The memo referenced incident echoing parameters similar to the rattle spine anomaly, 1978. No further explanation. Even the request denial letter sent to a follow-up FOIA inquiry was unsettling in tone. Portions of this case file are sealed indefinitely under National Security Directive 3245-A. No further disclosures will be made. Translation: someone had buried the Reed case decades ago and done so forcefully. What's worse? Cross-referencing archived local reports from the time revealed the FBI's official position in 1991 was non-involvement, meaning they lied. Why would a federal agency, in secret, investigate the sudden disappearance of a small-town family and then go to great lengths to erase their presence? And what were they trying to prevent people from seeing? The podcaster who uncovered the file shared it online. It was quickly removed under DMCA orders. Then her website went offline entirely. No explanation, no backup copy. She later said in a now-deleted tweet, "It's not about the family, it's about the thing they saw." The redactions didn't hide incompetence. They hid knowledge, and someone, somewhere, was making sure no one else got close to it again. In late 2016, an amateur cartographer named Felix Ahn was mapping abandoned infrastructure zones across U.S. national parks using publicly available satellite imagery and government topofiles. A side project, nothing official. But in the process of cataloging off-grid clearings, he found something in Ravens Hollow that made him pause. It was a strip of cleared land, rectangular, 30 feet wide, running perfectly straight for over 600 meters. It sliced through otherwise untouched forest. No trail markings, no Park Service road, and at either end of this clearing was a fence. Metal, industrial, not the kind used to keep out animals, the kind used to keep out people. Zooming in with high-resolution overlays, he found motion sensors, infrared cameras, no gate, no signage, no access road leading in, just fencing, perfectly maintained. And at the center of this fenced area? Nothing, at least above ground. But LiDAR data, public only for a brief time due to a 2020 policy rollback, showed something buried below. A grid, square-shaped, metallic reflection consistent with reinforced plating or venting structures, possibly subterranean. In other words, a bunker. Felix tried reaching out to park authorities. No response. He filed requests under the Freedom of Information Act. All denied. When he posted about it on a mapping forum, the thread was flooded with spam within hours. His images were taken down repeatedly. Eventually, his account was suspended for suspicious activity. But one image survived, reposted on a mirror site. It showed a crude path leading to the fence's perimeter, partially overgrown but still visible. And next to it, in the dirt, someone had spray-painted 2 words, "Stay out." No one knows who painted it. Felix believes the fencing was installed in the early 90s, matching the same time frame as the FBI's sealed investigation into the Reeds. Others believe it has nothing to do with the Reeds at all, that the family just got too close to something they were never supposed to see. But one thing is certain, there's no record of that structure in any public land survey, no blueprints, no contracts, no funding trail. And yet it's there, a fence in the middle of nowhere, surrounding nothing, or maybe protecting us from what lies beneath. It was cataloged without fanfare, one of dozens of items pulled from the mold-warped trailer by evidence techs. But unlike the Polaroids or Daniel's journal, this object felt deliberate, a choice, not forgotten, hidden. Tucked inside a rusted tin box beneath old batteries and expired ration packs was a plastic cassette tape. The label was hand-scrawled in blue marker, faded but legible. "Sarah, do not listen." The handwriting was verified, Daniel's. There was no accompanying player, just the tape, C60, Memorex, estimated from early 90s manufacturing. It was found weeks after the initial sweep, stored among non-priority items, until a junior intern flagged it during a routine media audit. When the team retrieved it, they noticed something odd. The tape had been rewound, fully, as if someone had listened, and then returned it to the start. But no fingerprints were recoverable. The case was worn, clouded by grime. Still, curiosity pushed forward. They debated whether to play it. The label felt like a warning or a plea. In the end, they digitized it, created a secure file, assigned 3 listeners, 1 FBI audio analyst, 1 behavioral profiler, and 1 linguist. What they heard would never be released publicly. But one of them, later removed from the case after filing for early medical leave, said just 6 words to her superior before resigning. He recorded it knowing he'd die. The file was locked, restricted to level 4 access. and reclassified as non-evidentiary material, psychological hazard. But a transcript exists, and what it contains is not easily explained. Start of recording, 0000000. At first, it's mundane, a soft click, the sound of someone sitting near the recorder, fabric shifting. Daniel's voice comes through, clear, calm, steady. "Hey, kiddo, if you're hearing this, it means I'm not with you. Or maybe you found this when you weren't supposed to. Either way, I need you to be strong." He tells a story, a bedtime one, about a rabbit and a fox who learned to share a garden. His tone is gentle, parental. Even when you're scared, you're never alone, okay? 000648. There's a pop, then static. Long, uneven, almost rhythmic. And underneath it, something else. A whisper, faint. Not Daniel, not Sarah, not any voice that matches known profiles. Analysts isolate the layer. The waveform is inconsistent with human speech patterns. Some segments are reversed, others don't follow any linguistic logic. One word repeats, open. 000851. Daniel's voice returns, but it's different now. Hurried. Don't let them in. If they come at night, don't answer the light. You remember the rules. The spirals mean they're watching. Gendo 000907. A bang, distant, like someone hitting the trailer. Sarah cries out, off mic. "Daddy?" More static. A tone, high-pitched, steady, like feedback, but deeper, low enough to feel, not just hear. Then silence. Then screaming. It lasts 7 seconds, unbroken, human but distorted, like a voice stretched too far. It fades suddenly. 001036. Click. End of tape. No further audio. The file ends. The analysts submitted their report with no conclusions, but the profiler left a handwritten note in the margin. This wasn't meant to be found. It was meant to be left behind. A message not to Sarah, but to us. The tape is now stored at Quantico, listed under anomalous artifacts. Its final tag reads, Unexplained Incident 73, RHREED, do not play without clearance. No one has played it since. But someone once asked the intern who discovered it what it sounded like. He paused, then said, like something that didn't want to be recorded, was recorded anyway. The forensic team had nearly concluded their cataloging of the trailer remains when they discovered a tin container under the support frame near Claire's skeleton. It was sealed with what looked like black electrical tape, 4 careful wraps around the lid. Inside were scraps of cloth, a folded tissue, and something small, hard, and unmistakably human, a tooth. Specifically, a molar, intact, no signs of decay. At first, they assumed it was Claire's. Proximity made that logical. But when dental records and mitochondrial DNA testing came back, it confirmed the truth. It wasn't hers. It wasn't Daniel's either. It belonged to a child, female, approximate age, 7 to 9 years old. But here's what stunned the lab team. The tooth was less than 15 years old. Estimated origin? Post-2000. The reeds vanished in 1990. The molar was sealed in the tin with enough care to suggest it wasn't lost. It was kept, preserved, hidden. No one could explain how it ended up next to Claire's remains, or why Daniel, based on journal proximity, might have placed it there. Was it Sarah's? If so, how had she survived long enough to lose a baby tooth years after the disappearance? Or worse, was it someone else's? Another child, another victim, another thread in the growing pattern. The dental structure didn't match Sarah Reed's known X-rays, and the DNA profile had no match in CODIS. Whoever the girl was, she wasn't reported missing, not officially. The case analyst logged the tooth under evidence, anomalous, biological, and quietly moved it to a secure holding unit separate from the rest of the Reed artifacts. There was one more detail, one no one put in the report. On the underside of the tin, scraped in faint etching, were 2 letters, TR, the same initials carved on the stick found near the cave 15 miles away. Tommy Reed. He would have been 10 in 2003. The math fits, but nothing else does. The final page of Daniel Reed's journal was unlike the rest. No rambling thoughts, no frantic warnings, just a series of neatly printed numbers. 4 sets, at first assumed to be nonsense, but when cross-referenced with GPS formatting, they aligned. Latitude and longitude. The coordinates led to a remote area of Ravens Hollow, off-map, off-trail, known to rangers only by a local name whispered among search teams. The Hollow. A glacial sinkhole, circular, nearly a quarter-mile wide. Dense fog gathers there even in dry weather. Wildlife avoids it. Birds fly around its rim. Park records indicate at least 4 hikers have gone missing near the Hollow in the past 30 years. None found. Not even gear. When a survey team was dispatched, they returned after only an hour. They claimed their gear began to malfunction. Compass needles spun, GPS lost signal, radios buzzed with dead air, then screeching static. And then nothing. Silence. One ranger reported seeing movement near the far edge. Something white, human-shaped. But when they tried to approach, the fog became too thick. The official report was vague. Field survey inconclusive. Area not suitable for further investigation. Unofficially, one team member transferred to a different post within the week. He left a note behind. I saw a girl standing still, hair over her face. She smiled when I looked at her. I don't know why that scared me more than anything else. The Hollow has remained off-limits since, but Daniel's coordinates point directly to the center, and scrawled beside the numbers, almost as an afterthought, is a single line written in caps. It ends where it began. What did he mean? Did he take the children there? Did something else? No one has searched the Hollow since. At least, no one who came back. In October 2017, spurred by the discovery of Daniel's coordinates, a private expedition team, funded quietly by an anonymous donor, secured permission to explore the Hollow. They were experienced, 2 ex-military SR operatives, 1 geologist, 1 forensic archaeologist, no press, no public record. Their descent began at 7:03 a.m. At the lip of the Hollow they noted strange compass drift, again, but the GPS system held long enough to begin rappelling. The sinkhole dropped 40 feet, then curved inward. A natural shelf led into a narrow tunnel carved through glacial limestone. Humidity rose, oxygen dipped, static buzzed faintly through their radios. They continued. 2 hours in, they found the bones, scattered, ungrouped. Some small, some large, some snapped unnaturally. One skull bore hairline fractures inconsistent with a fall. Nearby, on the stone wall, were claw marks, 4-pronged, too deep for human fingernails. Could be a tool, one of them said. Could be something else, another muttered. Then they found it, wedged between 2 stones, a notebook, not moldy, protected in a Ziploc bag, labeled crudely, Caleb, property of. It wasn't the Reeds. Inside, page after page of childish handwriting, panicked, disjointed, messy. One page read, I heard Sarah crying. Then she stopped. They come at night. They don't like the light, but they're getting braver. They flipped ahead. Tommy said to be brave. He left to find the old path. I don't think he made it. Then silence. Then, they're in the walls now. By 3:45 p.m., the team called for extraction. They didn't explore further. When asked why, one team member only said, we weren't alone down there. What they brought back would change everything. Because Caleb shouldn't have been there. And yet, he had been. The notebook was authenticated. The paper matched late 80s school supply stock. The handwriting, once compared with missing persons files, gave them a name. Caleb Meyer, age 11. Last seen, September 1989. He vanished while camping with his uncle near the northern edge of Ravens Hollow. His disappearance had been written off as a river drowning, never investigated beyond a cursory search. But this journal said otherwise. The pages told a different story. It started normal, games with Tommy, mentions of the girl with the cracked glasses, Sarah, and hiding snacks under the tarp. But the tone shifted by the halfway point. He mentioned the watchers in the stone. Then, the air smells different now, like metal, like when Dad used to weld. The entries grew more erratic, more afraid. He referenced tunnels no one had mapped, claimed to have seen lights moving in the rock behind the cracks. And then, an entry dated October 12, 1993. 4 years, I think. No one talks anymore. Only whispers. Sometimes I forget my voice. He would have been 15. Later pages are scratched into the paper, pressing so deep they left dents on the back cover. I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home. Then finally, one last page. Written in near-perfect clarity. Calm, resigned. We're still down here. The notebook ends. No one knows how it got to the lower cavern. But forensic analysis showed something chilling. The ink on the final page was fresh, written no earlier than 2016, the year before the team found it. Which means Caleb, or someone else, had been alive much longer than anyone thought, or still was. Some say it's impossible. Others say that's what the Hollow does. It bends time and keeps what enters. The name Grace Holloway first appeared in a 2007 ER intake report in Asheville, North Carolina. She arrived alone, dehydrated, confused, barefoot. Said she'd been hiking. She bore no ID, no phone. Her fingerprints were smudged, burned partially, as if from flame or chemical exposure. She stayed 2 nights, then left against medical advice, but not before muttering a name to the nurse during sedation. Claire. The nurse flagged it, just in case. Later, a forensic analyst revisiting the Reed file during the 2015 trailer discovery ran the prints from Grace Holloway through a latent match query. A partial alignment. Further testing, bone marrow extraction from a blood-stained hospital gown, confirmed it. Grace Holloway was Sarah Reed, alive, and somehow free in 2007, but only briefly. In early 2009, Sarah, now living under the alias Grace H., vanished again, this time from a bus stop in Kentucky. No record of where she was heading. Her last known words, captured by a gas station attendant on a receipt: "Don't let them know I'm out." The receipt was dated July 2nd. She disappeared on July 3rd. Exactly 19 years to the day since her family vanished. Only 2 came back from the woods. Claire's bones, Sarah's reappearance. And then, silence, as if the forest had reached out once more and taken back what escaped. Tommy Reed was 5 years old in 1990. If he survived past the trailer, past the cave, past the hollow, he'd be 40 now. But no trace of him has ever surfaced. No confirmed sightings, no body, only sounds. Every year, like clockwork, forest rangers at Ravens Hollow report hearing howls echoing from the basin. Not wolves, not coyotes. Something else, low, drawn out, always around midnight on July 3rd. Motion sensors trip but capture nothing. Drones lose signal. Every ranger who's gone down to investigate has come back saying the same thing. There was nothing there, but it felt like something new I was. Tommy's initials, TR, were found scratched into a tree trunk near the hollow in 2021. The bark was fresh, the carving recent. No prints, no trail. Just a single horizontal line carved beneath the letters. Some think it's a tally. Others think it's a message. The case remains unsolved. The hollow remains closed. The Reed family's file sits in a locked cabinet in Quantico. A red label across the folder reads, "Unresolved, active anomaly." But every July 3rd, someone on patrol still radios in, hearing it again, same place, same time. And for a moment, the forest listens back. Still waiting, still watching, still missing. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.